listening to Dollar Box Reads with Jason Tudor.
All right. Welcome back to Dollar Box Reads. My name is Jason Tudor. Thank you for joining us for yet another power-packed episode of Reading Old Comics. That's it. That's what we do. Actually, we're a little more than that. We've got a great show for you this time around. I think I've got some really special stuff for you coming up, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. I want to let you know that this episode of the show is brought to you by Vorpal, my comic, issues 1 and 2. You can get those right now at indieplanet.us and Comixology. Just search for Vorpal, V-A-V-O-R-P-A-L, and you will get your copy right now. So what's happening? How have you been? What a week! Coming off of the finale of Game of Thrones, and what a finale it was. That encompasses my entire Game of Thrones watching, which is now 4 episodes deep, including that one, which was the 4th, and the one before that, which was the 3rd. Wow, what a reaction from the crowd at large, but not really a surprise given the social media age that we live into, that people, more than 1 million people, put a petition up to rewrite season 8. And, you know, Hollywood, of course, they get petitions and they make billion-dollar decisions based on petitions, and you know they're going to redo that, right? Yeah, right. That's never going to happen. And the problem that we, of course, face in a social media encrazed society. Encrazed? Is that like an encrasin? Can you eat an encrasin? That's not a word. A social media-powered society is that we feel as though we are democratized to do such things, that if enough of our voices are heard because Khaleesi got stabbed or whatever, that we can just change season 8. We can just say, nope, that one doesn't count. But, you know, even if they did, how many do-overs do you get? What if the season 8.1 sucked, and then season 8.2 sucked, and then season 8.3 sucked? What if they all sucked? What if it's never going to end the way we want it? Everything ends badly, or it wouldn't end. And that's it. That's how it goes. Very few television shows get the privilege of ending when they want to end. This goes way back to the Dick Van Dyke Show, which is always the hallmark show of shows that ended when they were supposed to end, right? It ended early. They were all in their primes. Mary Tyler Moore, Dick Van Dyke, Maury Amsterdam. I mean, this is old. This is early 60s stuff, right? But that was the show that sort of signified, well, this is how TV shows should end, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know how they wrapped it up, but it didn't matter. And then the next big show that everybody remembers ended well was MASH, which I think ended in 1979. And they wrote the episode, and it was these fond farewells. And from that point on, there really hasn't been a show that's ended as well as people would have liked it. Maybe House. But the problem is that these shows are written on budgets based on season to season, on ratings, on stars, on the number of ads they sell, and just whatever way the wind blows based on all of that. And most shows just die. That's it. They're done. And some shows are just canceled. What was the show on Fox that I really loved? Nearly Human, I think is what it was. It had Carl Urban, and it had the other guy who played the android. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. I love that show. It was one of the few TV shows that I grasped onto and watched the whole season. Sure enough, the season ends. Boom, it's gone. What's the show that everybody wants back, that they're not going to get back? Firefly. It's not coming back. It's 2 seasons. It had a limited run. It didn't sell enough ads. It wasn't appealing enough to a broad enough audience. But here we were with Game of Thrones, and here was an opportunity to close out the show in a way that was sort of suitable for whatever purposes it was suitable. I didn't really watch 4 episodes. I'm sorry, I don't know. Maybe my friend Dan Bethel's listening, and he could write me a note and say what should have happened. He's the smart guy here. But many of you are smarter people than me. Whatever, on Game of Thrones. The point is, nobody liked the ending. Very few people liked the ending. The way that it was broken out into was either you hated it or you were satisfied with it. Like, all right, the end, But it wasn't like, that's the way it should have ended. Khaleesi should be on fire with Jon Snow wrapped in her arms as Krispy Kreme donuts shoot out of her hands. Whatever. Wasn't going to happen. Didn't happen. And I guess that was attributable to them running out of source material and sort of making things up on napkins as they went and leaving water bottles and coffee cups around, whatever it was. Didn't work, right? And so here we are. And so the problem is that you're not going to get a show that ends that way anyway anymore. They're not going to end anymore. TV shows and film franchises are not going to end. They're just going to stop. They're just going to stop. And where they stop is where they've stopped. You're not going to get these sort of satisfying denouement ending or whatever you want to call it to go walk away from and go, okay, I can move on with my life. It's always going to be hanging over your head. Where did Jon Snow go? Where did the dragon fly off with Khaleesi? Khaleesi might still be alive. So does that mean she gets another show because she's come back to life as Dark Khaleesi, like Dark Phoenix, whatever it might be, whatever. The point is, these things stop, especially a multi-million, perhaps billion-dollar franchise like the Game of Thrones television series. There is too much material to make other things off of and to make success. So it's stopped. And you're not going to get that ending. But the petition idea is ridiculous. Oh, let's petition to make another Last Jedi. Yeah, the film still made $1 billion. I'm sure they will listen to every single voice that said that film sucked. But this is the sort of false power that social media has right now is, well, maybe if we all band together in 1 million voices, we can change it. You won't. It's not going to happen. There are, of course, many things that those voices can change, but it's a $1 billion decision. It's not going to happen, and that's kind of that. So I enjoyed watching the ending episode for sure. It was a great finale. I enjoyed seeing the artistry of how they put it together. It wasn't 45 minutes of straight up carnage like the penultimate episode was, of just breathing fire into streets and watching people turn to charcoal, which is fine. That's okay too. But it was fine to watch. And then I moved on and watched the end of a hockey game. So, and I think that's how a lot of people felt who felt like they got a good ending. And I think some people are sort of rah-rah-rahing who said, I got exactly the ending I wanted. I don't think you did. I think from season, 4 to 5 on, based on all the squawking I heard, it just hasn't been the same show. And signing a petition, or, you just have to live with what it is. It is what it is. These things age better with time anyway. Most shows do. Lost has aged better with time. The Seinfeld ending has aged better with time. Jerry Steinfeld's still crying all the way to the bank. The checks are still cashing. Doesn't care how it ended. He just cares that he could buy vintage cars and make comedians in cars with coffee and head to the bank and cash the check. The ending does not matter. It just doesn't, because things stop. They don't end anymore because that's the kind of perpetual society we live in. I have a great show for you lined up. I get to read you and talk about Captain Canuck this week. That makes me very happy. And the other thing that makes me very, very happy is I got to talk to one of my favorite comic book writers, one of my favorite people, actually. Last time I talked to him was 7 years ago. His name is Michael Barron. He is the writer of Nexus, the writer of Badger. He has written for The Flash, for Batman, and many, many other things. I asked him some advice about writing, what he's doing right now, including a great idea called Florida Man, and another great idea he's got going, and I'm going to be sharing those Kickstarters with you on the website coming up. And I can't wait to share that interview with you because I'm always appreciative when someone like Mike takes time to talk to me and share what's going on in his world. So that's what's coming up on the show. I hope you have enjoyed the previous shows. If you have, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or on Spreaker or on Google Play Music or on Spotify or on one of the other platforms where the show is available. The easiest way is to go to dollarboxreads.libsyn.com and get that feed and get that in there. But iTunes is also pretty simple. That works there. And get the show coming to you each week. I'm very happy. Thank you for supporting the show and making the numbers go up each week. That makes me very, very happy. And I hope to continue to bring you a good quality show, even through some upcoming changes that I have in the next month or so. So I'm excited about that. So coming up next is This Old Comic. I'll leave that a surprise for you as to what's coming up on This Old Comic. And then we will have the reads and our interview with Mike Barron. So please stick around. That said, I want to talk to you about Crazy Monkey Inc. Crazy Monkey Inc. is my publisher. They are a fantastic group of folks producing fantastic comics. Darum, Taxi Cab Joe, my own comic, Vorpal, and many, many others under the hood of Crazy Monkey Inc. and my friend Gabriel Olraz Ramirez out in my hometown of San Diego, California. Gabe is doing a fantastic job helming. He is a marketing machine, and he keeps the fires burning with all the writers and all the artists and all the folks under his mantle. Just some quality products. I really love Darum, and I'm going to be interviewing the writer of Darum Jerry Griffith here on the next show, so I hope you'll be around for that. A young writer trying to make his way in the world with this product and others. And I really love Taxi Cab Joe too. I think it's I'm not into horror, I'm not into that, but it's I like the idea. It's just a lot of fun. It's a lot of frenzy. I like Gabe's comic Midnight Avenger. Those are all under the Crazy Monkey Inc. banner. And what you get from buying Crazy Monkey Inc. is buying from a small business, buying from people who are trying to break into the trade, who may even be into the trade but are at a place where they want to move farther. And you can help them do that. If it's material you like, you're going to see some great stuff with Crazy Monkey Inc. So head on over to the Instagram, Crazy Monkey Inc. You can also find the comics on indieplanet.us. Just search for Crazy Monkey Inc. And they will pop up for you. Of course, you can find my comic Vorpal there as well, issues 1 and 2. Issue 3, we have 20 pages colored, 4 more to go. Mike Montalvo is steaming along, and I am hoping for a July-August release for that comic to finally get Chapter 3 out in the wild. I love it. I think it's a brilliant chapter. Art by Diego Albuquerque, story by me, letters by me, and, of course, colors by Mike Montalvo. That's all from Crazy Monkey Inc., a fantastic independent publisher. Get to know them, as I said. Their Instagram is Crazy Monkey Inc. You can also find them on Facebook. When I come back, it's time for This Old Comic. Stick around. Hey, you listening? Well, this is a space normally where an advertisement would go, but instead you get to hear more of my sultry tones. That said, if you'd like to advertise in this space, I'd love to have you, a reader, a produced commercial, or whatever it might be. I'll put you right here, right in this spot, right in this very damn spot. Reach out to me, info at jasontutor.com, or hit me up on Facebook. Also, don't forget to drop a like on the Dollar Box Reads by Jason Tudor Facebook page. I'd love for you to do that. You'd be like my Facebook crush. It would be amazing. Anyway, drop me a like on the Facebook page. But if you want to advertise, put it right here, baby. Talk to me, info at jasontutor.com, and let's have a conversation. All right, let's get back to the show. See ya!
You're listening to Dollar Box Reads with Jason Tudor.
Welcome back. It's time for This Old Comic. And amongst the 2x4s and nails of the dollar boxes and everything else is this comic, which I'm not really going to talk about a specific issue of this comic, but rather the span of 300 issues that became this comic, which was eventually put into the public, or will be put into the public domain, which is probably responsible for the groundswell / grassroots independent comic movement to which I'm a part of, to which many of the people who I associate amongst the grassroots comic movement of today is part of. And that comic, of course, is Cerebus the Aardvark. Now, if you've never read Cerebus the Aardvark, it's tough to get into. It's a pretty long storyline, 300 issues, that is divided into a lot of sub-graphic novels. But Cerebus the Aardvark is an anthropomorphized. I knew I was going to screw that word up the moment I said it. Congratulations to me. Anthropomorphized character as an aardvark, through which I believe that Dave Sim, who is the creator, he's out of Toronto area. He once said that Cerebus would sound like George C. Scott, which I can totally hear, although that's not the voice I got, but if he says that's what he sounds like, I'm willing to take that. Cerebus started in 1977. As I recall, they were all printed in black and white, and he wasn't working with the background artist Gerhard at the time. That came later. So December 1977, so just, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months after Star Wars was released into the world. And it concluded on March 2004. The 300-issue series is, I believe, it also just was named to a Guinness Book of World Records. Dave Sim was named as a world record holder for the person to write and draw in the most consecutive comic books. So that was an interesting record, or an interesting world record that he took there. So if you don't know the story, it's basically kind of a fantasy story about an aardvark who comes through different rises and falls of power. But the book itself explores tremendous tremendous avenues through religion and politics, and has these tremendous character studies, but it also does these brutal parodies. At one point, Dave Sim got nearly sued by Marvel for making fun of Wolverine. There's a character called Wolveroach that's in the book, and there's they make fun of Chris Claremont, and he's really doing all of these sort of tropes that were the epitome of Marvel Comics at the time, that were making X-Men such a huge success, which I also think birthed previous This Old Comic Talk About topic, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But Wolveroach was one of my favorites, and it's in one of my favorite sections or arcs of Cerebus, which I'll talk about here in a second. But he 300 issues. That's incredible. That's he did all of those, and again was later joined by background artist Gerhardt. And they mocked all sorts of things. They mocked my favorite fantasy character, Elric of Melniboné, by Michael Moorcock. They mocked the Grouch Brothers. I mean, all of these different things. But this is a really sophisticated, timely book, and Dave Sim, because of the way that he did it, how he approached the independent movement, and how he was able to generate sales through Aardvark-Vanaheim and through all sorts of things, was sort of a scion for independent publications, and led him to led others like Jeff Smith, creator Bone, and Terry Moore from Strangers in Paradise, and Martin Wagner from Hepcats, and I mean, you can go on and on with that, but he was the inspiration behind a lot of those folks coming to being. And again, I've seen Mr. Sim's name cited as a reason for why we have a sort of independent comics movement, why Marvel and DC don't just reign over all things as they did, and why we got First Comics when we did, and some of the other titles that we did in the early 80s and even into today, and why we have an indieplanet.us, and why we have a Kablam-type publisher, and some of these printing houses are able to sustain at least part of their business publishing independent comics. Sim is also a sort of a lightning rod for criticism as well. But I won't get into Sim. I only say that my first encounter with Cerebus was about the same time that I walked into the Lemon Grove bookstore and found John Sable, and that's when I saw John Sable and Grimjack and Baron, or in Badger and Nexus, and I saw Cerebus. It was right there, but I didn't get into it back then because it just seemed a little too off to the left to me, but when I finally picked it up later on, I decided this was most definitely a comic for me. And the part that did that for me was I was traveling in England while I was in the military, and I found a copy of Church and State Volume 1. Church and State Volume 1, that collective set of comics that makes up is absolutely, positively one of the smartest, funniest, most well-drawn comic book reads I have ever read. It's one of the best reads I have ever read. There's a page in the book that I blew up on 11 by 17 paper, and I hang on my day job office wall. And the basic crux of it is you may get what you want, but you may not like it. But if you see the page and the way that he executes the page, it's brilliant. And Church and State, Volume 1, is brilliant in all regards. It's touching, it's human, it's brutal, and it goes through all the beautiful political machinations and everything so well. I cannot over recommend Church and State #1 to you if you have a chance. It's worth every penny. In fact, I've got to get a new copy. Mine's worn out. A dog's chewed through it. I lent it to a friend. Their dog chewed through it. Church and State 2 is the follow-up. Not as strong, but it is the companion to it. And there is a great section where the judge and Cerebus are talking, and that he's talking about how the armies of the Red Marches were made, and how they'd send 1,000 troops in, and those 100 would come back, and they'd take those 100 and send 1,000 with them, and that 200 would come back, and they said that's how they made the best army in the world. But the way that Sim writes it is he knows the craft, he knows how to draw the craft. It's brilliant work, and so the way that Cerebus has affected the entire comic book industry. DC offered to buy it at one point, and he said no. I think they were offering too little based on the source material I read, and that's probably why he said no, probably because he also had a good thing. Admittedly, when issue 100 came out, he had his best sales, and then sales fell off after that, primarily because, well, it's hard to get into. You're diving into an ongoing story, and I have to go back 6 issues to figure out what this is, and he admitted that as well. But once you know that, and if you're a connoisseur of comics, you want to get into Cerebus. You want to understand these great stories. They're deep and they're adult. And I think that was another lacking piece that was not there, was these are adult comics. And they're not meant for children necessarily. They are adult-styled reading. They're fashioned for someone who's like, oh, I can read this without feeling like I'm 8 years old, or whatever stigma that they might have had. There's some other great combined. Jaka Story is another wonderful combine, but not my favorite for sure. Reeds is another one. And a lot of people didn't like the way Cerebus sort of ended, but it is appropriate given the way that Sim wrote the character and kind of what an ass Cerebus was. So if you do get to read how he ended, it's an interesting take on how that goes. But the way Cerebus has affected things and what he's done to help advance comic book makers that were not necessarily in the mainstream of the Marvel DC sort of churn, is why that old comic, Cerebus 1 through 300, pick your issue, and that whole run of Cerebus sort of affected the entire industry. There's been a couple of fan efforts. I've seen one on Twitter, which I still subscribe to create a Cerebus film. That would be interesting and difficult, but I could see how they could do it with animation. But I'm all for that. I'm all for this product. I love Cerebus, and I hope something else is done soon. And one of my other favorite artists, I almost forgot to mention this, but Barry Windsor Smith worked on Cerebus once, and that's all I needed to see from there. So if you get a chance, I would go with Church and State #1. That's really fantastic, great, thoughtful, fun, well-done comic booking to its best degree, and it's great to read. All right, that's this old comic. When I come back, we'll do the reads. Talk to you in a minute. Hey, you listening? Well, this is a space normally where an advertisement would go, but instead you get to hear more of my sultry tones. That said, if you'd like to advertise in this space, I'd love to have you. A reader, a produced commercial, or whatever it might be. I'll put you right here, right in this spot, right in this very damn spot. Reach out to me, info at jasontutor.com, or hit me up on Facebook. Also, don't forget to drop a like on the Dollar Box Reads by Jason Tudor Facebook page. I'd love for you to do that. You'd be like my Facebook crush. It would be amazing. Anyway, drop me a like on the Facebook page. But if you want to advertise, put it right here, baby. Talk to me, info at jasontutor.com, and let's have a conversation. All right, let's get back to the show. See ya!
You're listening to Dollar Box Reads with Jason Tudor.
All right, it's Reads time. I'm Jason Tudor. It is time on Sprockets when we dance. The whole reason for the show, right? Of course. And so, of course, we have 3 comics that we are going to read this week, or that I have read, and that I'm going to tell you about straight out of my dollar box. And as announced earlier this week, they are Starcore #3. Marvel Fanfare #52. And breathlessly waiting to read you Captain Canuck #12. We will get to that in a bit. First, let's talk about Starcore. Starcore is a DC series. This one was published in, when was this one? 1994. So this was 90s comics. I wasn't really picking up comics back in the 90s. And so the team was Dan Vado, storytelling and dialogue. Norman Felschley, storytelling and pencils. I'm going to screw that name up. Mike Macklin was inks. Gene D'Angelo was colors. John Costanza was letters. And the editors are the editors. So this one was based in Seattle. And there was a science project that was going on, and this kid had volunteered himself, the one that's on the cover here. He was a science guinea pig for whatever program or college or whatever it was, and he talks about how he was guinea pigging, and he went on this journey, this process where they were trying to tap into his latent powers of ESP, and they sort of did that, and they gave him, in doing so, they had him tap into this latent computer conscious, and it gave him these different powers. And so throughout the story, you have these scientists who have called upon these androids when they're in the process of these experiments. They sort of come out of nowhere. and they have to evacuate this machine called Mind Game, and it's a total like 1994. Here, have a look if you're on the video. It's kind of a 1994 looking sort of version of what a living computer would look like. It's got these rounded sort of mosque-y looking domes and everything else, and so they go to shut it off, and then the lights go out, and the usual sort of cliche things start happening. These androids show up and start killing things, and eventually they have to rely on this kid who's been guinea pigging and his powers, and he has these sort of powers to melt the androids, and then he melts more androids, and he gets them out of there, and then he turns on the scientist who's been helping him, and he doesn't kill the guy, but then he sort of hurts the guy, and then he wants to show him what his life has been like, so he puts him through this sort of paranormal visions that he's having. And comic ends by the kid who's been guinea pigging showing the scientists, and then it sort of ends it with somebody coming up going, "What happened?" And nothing at all. And so the scientist who's been helping him gets sucked into this sort of scientific field at the end. His body gets descrambled, sort of a la Tron, or what's another one where the body gets ripped apart, but his conscious is like in Watchmen, like at the end of Watchmen when he gets ripped apart and then comes back as that. So this is definitely a $1 comic. I tried to get into it. It's got some really funky cliche lines. I'm trying to find the one that gets repeated over and over again. Let me see if I can find it. It's the one by the scientist. The kid is telling him what's happened and that he's got these powers. And he keeps telling the scientist, look, this happened to me. And he's being very detailed about it. But over and over again, the scientist just keeps saying, where is it? You're babbling. He says, you're babbling. He says, you've got to stop that. But he says it like 4 times. Even though the kid's been right the first 3 times, he gets a 4th time to go, you've got to stop this nonsense. Here it is. You're starting to babble, Mr. Barnes. I have to run some more tests when the power comes back on. Even though they're in like the throes of a massive scientific crisis. Climate change, nobody believes, or something like that. But on a more localized scale, like climate change in a building. Nobody believes that climate change is happening in the building. It is. And so he keeps saying, you're babbling, Mr. Barnes. Blah, 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 blah. So they go on and on with this, and there's some phone calls and androids, and Mr. Barnes ends up saving the day as the guy with the eyeball laser powers. Again, 94, number 3. I suppose I probably could have picked this up. Star, I believe, is the corporation. That's a Star Labs. Let me see. What does Star stand for? Star Labs, right. Let me see. Star. I thought they defined it. But there's another. My favorite panel is this panel, if you see it on video, is this of his. He has a nightmare of his mother coming at him with this spiked fly swatter, but that one piece she's got working coming toward him is fantastic. So there's your panel of the week. For this issue anyway, and then the clown with the flamethrower. But it's an interesting concept. It's just there's some really hard cliched dialogue here that just doesn't work. So definitely a $1 bin comic, though some of the art is pretty good, and some of the art is very good, and I like some of the colors toward the back. I really like, if you're on the video again, this panel of when Mr. Barnes gets the scientist. Here he is. He's doing a Mr. Fantastic stretchy reimagining and trying to tell him what he's been going through. So it's pretty cool, but the story itself was kind of clunky and wrought with cliche. But they gave it a shot. That's why it's in the $1 bin. The second one that I found in the $1 bin this week, Marvel Fanfare 52, and it actually stars, and I remember when I bought it, one of my favorite characters, the Black Knight. And I remember the Black Knight because he had a sword that was made out of a chunk of a star, and I always thought that was pretty cool. But I always had a kind of a like for the British characters of the Marvel Universe. So you had like the Black Knight, you had Captain Excalibur, and you had all those British characters, and they've been featured more recently in a great annual. I can't remember the number, but I have that somewhere. I have to do that in 1 week when we talk about different kinds of comics. But so this is a tale of Black Knight. And it's basically like a Crusades tale. And, of course, the Black Knight at that time was Dane Whitman. And he is... there's a great opening, too, by the way, by Al Milgrom, where he's talking about, how am I going to open this story? and it ends with a Snoopy panel that says, "He was a dark and stormy night," which is pretty good. I thought that was pretty funny. So that was a pretty good start. I really like the art in this issue. So the art in this one was Scott Hampton and Ernie Chan, and the art in this issue is great. The problem with the story is that, like, and the artist, look at this panel. This is really a nice panel on page 3 of one of the Muslim soldiers going through something there, or Muslim rather. I think he's one of Saladin's handmaids or something like that. And then you have like the Black Knight on the horse here. Just some really beautiful artistic stuff happening. So needless to say, the Saladin character and the Dark Knight character get into a bit of a tete-a-tete, and they start fighting and through their crusades, and they end up with this sort of primitive tribe, and they are subjected to these kind of witchcraft rituals, and the Saladin character disappears, but the knight feels an obligation to go after him, so he dives into this witchcrafty ceremony through the smoke, and they encounter an alien. The knight cuts the alien, frees the Saladin guy, but can't free the woman who was the sacrifice from earlier. Again, on video, another brilliant-looking panel with this sort of idolatry, bull, pregnant-looking statue there. And then some really gorgeous pages in here. It's just that the story was pretty hokey. There's a line in here. Of course, Dane Whitman is, a dude, and he's not a Black Knight, but there's a great line in here. This is the best line of all 3 of the comics. He says, "The god of the hill, Moloch, if I remember my comparative mythology." I mean, he has time to, let me see. I've got this alien monster. It's about to kill this dude. Let me think through my comparative. He verbally references comparative, but that's kind of the fun of Marvel, I guess. And here's where he dives in such well-drawn panels, dives through the magic ether or whatever it is to save the Saladin character, and then uses the Star Sword to cut up the beast, free his newfound friend in that, and end the adventure. They kind of part ways as I don't want to say friends, but as warriors, fist bump, right? Chest bump, testosterone. Anyway, the art is beautiful. The story is clunky, but it's not. It's clunky in the sense that it's like they tried to do night, but they also tried to do not night, and it was kind of an in between. And then the second thing they try to do with this one, and I totally get it. By the way, this is August 1990. So what was that? It made me, 21. 21st birthday year. They try to do a lot. So this is during the Crusades. Red flag. And so you have Black Knight as a Christian, and then they have these Muslim warriors that they're fighting, but then there's some really hokey stuff. They keep trying to sort of appease everyone throughout it, and say something like, let's see, where's the first time I noticed it? I guess it was here. The battle ends and the cross reigns over the acre, the stench of death everywhere. The Lord of this holy land, be he Allah or Jehovah, has taken follower and foe with hungry indifference and waits for the prayers that will follow the slaughter. And then Black Knight, I think this is the writer's homage, says, treat the survivors well regardless of their faith. Right. And no looting. He says that, and no looting. So needless to say, somebody starts to loot, and that's where the Saladin friend character, I can't remember his name, he's a Sarsian. And so there's more of that goes on, and it goes like, be you Christian, Muslim, and even they throw in, or Jew. It's uncanny. But they're trying to walk this sort of fine line so as not to offend, and just make it sort of a crusade-centered story or a caliphate-centered story and sort of like that. So it's an interesting dichotomy, though. I do like how Black Knight and this Sarsian sort of get together and become friends at the end, but it's one of those manly friend things where they have to beat the shit out of something in order for them to become friends. So that's kind of how that happens, and that shows up in the book. Again, the art is brilliant. Now, the thing that really caught me on this one, the story was okay, but the art was brilliant. So this is definitely not a dollar comic, if only for the art. But I had to catch my breath, because in the back there is a Doctor Strange feature called Mirror Mirror, And looky who the artist is for this bad boy. Where is it? There it is. Gene Cologne and Al Williamson. Al Williamson, Star Wars artist, supreme, brilliant artist in his own right. One of my favorites growing up. And Tom Orzechowski doing the letters, one of my favorite letterers ever. So there's this little featurette back here of Doctor Strange with beautiful Al Milgrom and Gene Cologne, especially this. Very Gene Cologne-ish, again for the video, very Gene Cologne-ish, Kirby-esque sort of psychedelic panel, which was so Doctor Strange anyway, that whole vibe. But it's a nice little featurette. And then there's a portfolio by Paul Ryan, including, again on video, this wonderful Silver Surfer Galactus pinup, which is great. Kind of stuff that gets you want to draw, makes you want to become a comic artist. That looks wonderful. This is not a dollar comic. This is definitely worth something more than $1. If for the art alone, again, the Black Knight art is beautiful. You get the Al Williamson stuff in the back. You get the Gene Cologne stuff in the back. This is good stuff. This is definitely worth more than $1. And now the time has come. I pulled a Captain Canuck from the dollar bin. I love Captain Canuck. Love it. And I don't know why. I have collected every issue of Captain Canuck I could find, old or new, and I love this comic. I love this comic, the series, and I'll talk about 12 in a second, but I love the series because it's so not Marvel Comics. It's not... So I think many of us grew up in an era when the superhero and the supervillain were very New York Street, and everything had to evolve in skyscrapers, and there was buildings, and Doctor Strange had to come out on Bleecker Street, and everything had to evolve in skyscrapers, and there was a lot of population, and then things happened there, and you had a lot of opportunity to fight crime, and Batman had Gotham, and he could, wreak havoc on crime and Arkham Asylum and the whole thing. Very metropolitan, New York centered. Captain Canuck is not that. It was definitely so... I remember when I started reading it and how appealing it was just to see, like, oh, he's sort of out in the middle of nowhere, and, they're helping 3 or 4 people. And in this particular issue, he's trying to stave off an alien attack. And at one point gets sucked into this time vortex, and people think he's dead. And he gets sucked back in time, and he has to fight... or he's about to make friends with some natives of wherever he's been thrown back to, and he thinks he's going to have to. Well, he's going to enlist their help to do whatever he can, and then all of a sudden some Vikings attack, and there's Captain Canuck, and he decides to take the side of the natives and have a punch up with the Vikings, and that's pretty awesome. And I love the way the costume's drawn, and I love this style of art. And I love every bit about this comic. This is independent comics at its finest. You get this great letters column. Fan art! They have fan art. I love that. And what else do they got in here? They've got a little featurette called Beyond, which is great. But then at the end of the book, they've got a fantastic subscription page. Look at that. That is, again, on video. Sorry, listeners, but look at that. I love that. They have souvenir page. They have buttons and stickers and pens. I wanted all of this, but I was too late to the party. This is, I think, 1976. Let's see. Where did he put the date in this thing? I can't find the date. I'm sorry. I thought I had it right in front of me, but I do not. I'm pretty sure it's 76 or 77. Anyway, I love Captain Canuck. I can't say it enough. I just think, you think of comics that are sort of, that have a Canadian bent to them, like Alpha Flight. Of course, Wolverine is a Canadian character, which started, which helped Alpha Flight get its legs. Here we go. Okay, so this is 80. This is December 1980. CKR Productions. Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Oil country and rodeo country. But I love this comic. There's the back of the book. And there's the front. Love this book. And it's just because it's not standard fare. You're actually kind of going, what's he going to fight? Like bears? Or like beavers? Or and the way that the author and the artist worked this, it can't turn out really great. So I I love all of my issues of Captain Canuck, and I like the new issues of Captain Canuck. I'm just a big fan. So if you are the creator of Captain Canuck, I love your book, and thank you for producing it, and I've always been inspired by it. So if you get a chance, it's not a dollar comic, but you will find many of them in your dollar bins, and I recommend buying every single one of them because they're awesome. All right, that's all for the reads today. Again, if you like the reads, you can catch the video segment. It's on YouTube at Atomic Bazooka Studios. Just look for it there. And, of course, it's always in the podcast every week. It's about 15 minutes long, and we just read some dollar comics out of the dollar bin and try to see if they're worth $1 or they're worth more than $1 or maybe worth less than $1. Maybe like that earlier, the first one we had, the Star Corps, was not probably the most dollar bin-ish one that I've hit so far. And that's saying a lot because there's been some good quality so far, and I'm just, again, pulling stuff that I've bought for $1 out of many places. All right, when we come back, an interview with Mike Baron. Stick around. All right, I'm back, and one of my favorite comic book writers of all time, one of my favorite writers of all time, actually, is joining me again after a 7-year well, not absence. It's just we haven't talked in 7 years, and rightfully so. He says, I don't remember when we did that, Jason, and that's fair enough, and I appreciate that. Mike Baron is back with me. Mike, thanks for taking time. I really appreciate it. How are you, aside from the little thing we talked about earlier?
Yeah, my vehicle registration, I let it lapse. I don't understand how, but I just found a $75 ticket on my car. Other than that, I'm fine. Good. Well,
I'm glad to be talking to you again. I've always had one. I didn't ask this last time because I didn't want to fanboy too much, but I know last time I did mention I'm just such a huge Nexus fan and a huge Badger fan. But who thought up the Nexus costume? It is one of the most beautiful costume designs ever, and I'm curious how it sort of evolved. Can you talk a little bit about that before we sort of get into the swing of things?
Sure. The lightning bolt was my idea, and the ruby visor was my idea. Everything else is dudes. I just love the way the primary colors work. I just love the simplicity of it, and I mean, it works for me so well, and it's completely awesome. Now you've been busy lately. I mean, you've had. I want to get to BANSHEES, which really interests me. The one project that you have that I saw though is Florida Man. Is that still working for you? Well, we're going to launch a Kickstarter. I think probably in June. It's going to be published by Cautionary Comics.
Right.
And I've written 5 issues. It's the best thing I've ever done.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah. And when people read it, they're going to be shocked at how good it is. It's both what you expect and it's not what you expect.
All right.
But the thing is that I make every panel count. There's no wasted space. There's no decompression. It's all story, and it's hilarious.
And you've got a lot of material to work with. I mean, it's low-hanging fruit in the best sense, don't you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on how you handle it. I mean, people are going to go in with certain expectations, and I'm going to both fulfill them and upend them.
Right.
And by that, I mean, I'm not just sneering at the rubes here. Gary Duba, my character, he's a real human being.
Right.
And like all human beings, he's got his good points and his bad points.
Well, like we all do, right? No kidding. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to this one just because, again, it's as much as we get to read about Florida Man in the papers anyway, this is going to be a lot of fun. BANSHEES, though, actually hits a little closer to home for me because of what I put in my own comic book. I actually wrote in as a sci-fi. It's a sci-fi piece, but I wrote in that still bands who play traditional musical instruments have kind of come back in vogue. But I really like this because it's a satanic rock band, and
did you read the book?
I have not gotten through it all the way yet. No, sadly, when I got the idea to call you and interview you, I just started picking it up, and I'm only the first few pages in.
Okay.
But I'm a big fan of the idea, and I remember the last time we talked about how perfect you said The Exorcist was, and I'm curious how you chose to go in this direction.
Well, I love The Exorcist, but BANSHEES is totally original. It's my own creation, and it comes together from a lot of things.
Well, I know. Remember, too, we talked about you're a big music nut like I am.
Yeah.
So that plays well, too.
Yeah.
Are you a big metal fan?
Not really, although I do like Def Leppard.
Okay.
And I like prog rock.
and somebody said, and the blurb said, and I thought this was pretty apt, and that goes on to another question, that you have definitely the Quentin Tarantino of writing. Do you? I don't know that you feel that way, but when I read the blurb and I got the book, I sort of got a From Dusk to Dawn feel to it, but I'm guessing as I get pages into it, that's not the way it's going to go.
Well, we'll see. I mean, that blurb came from my friend and publisher Kevin J. Anderson, who's the well-known science fiction writer. He does the Dune novels. Yep. And his new book is called Spine of the Dragon. It's a big space-spanning fantasy. Mm-hmm. And I love it because it intrigues people. I myself am not the greatest Quentin Tarantino fan.
Oh, okay.
I watched Hateful Eight with disgust.
It was a little long.
I'll probably see his new one because, it's got Bruce Lee in it. But I like his earlier stuff. I think it's all been downhill since Pulp Fiction, but maybe he'll surprise me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm not sure why. The Sharon Tate murder happened on the day I was born, so.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, exactly. I've been trying to tell that to my friends. They're like, why are you happy about that? I'm like, I'm not. I'm happy about going to see the film, and it's something that happens on my birthday. So, crazy stuff. And you've had the other book that I haven't had a chance to read, but what interests me is Disco. This seems entirely different from the Mike Barrett that I know. Tell me it is.
Yeah. It is different. And I had the idea with me for a long time, but what made it happen was I asked Anne, my wife, I said, well, why don't you read one of my books? She said, I can't read any of your books. They're too horrible. They're too gruesome.
Right.
Why don't you write something I can read?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
What's interested you lately? What books have kind of caught your eye? Or no, actually, the question I really wanted to ask you is, and since this is an old comic book show that I'm doing now, are there any titles right now that intrigue you or that you're keeping up with that you go, I wouldn't mind writing for that one again? You wrote for Flash, you wrote for Star Wars, you wrote for Batman, you wrote for, obviously, Nexus Badger, but is there anything out there now that intrigues you?
Well, really, my own creations. I'm happiest writing my own creations. Sure. Nexus Badger, Florida Man. I just wrote 2 creations of Ben Henderson, the publisher of Cautionary Comics. He handed them to me, and I have written the first issues of Offworlder and The Wraith. And we're going to start a crowdfunder for that in about 10 days.
Okay.
And again, when people get this comic in their hands, and Offworlder is almost finished, and I don't know if you've seen the art.
I saw the cover art for it. It looks great.
Oh yeah, well, I'll send you some art from the interior pages, and your head will explode. And again, when people read these comics, they're going to go, wow, it's not just the art, it's the combination of the art and story working together.
Right.
It's going to make other comics look like those people aren't even trying.
Those are my favorite kind of comics, Mike. The thing, this is a gratuitous question, but the thing I always wanted you to do was, and I love Mike Grell's John Sable, but I always wanted to see your take on John Sable. Were you when you were at first, were you aware of the other titles? Did you know those guys?
Sure. Oh, yeah, we got all those comics. We read them. Was there a bullpen? Did you know Mike or no? Okay. Oh, I know Mike. I've known Mike for years. He's a great guy, and I love John Sable.
Former Air Force guy, by the way, Mike Grell.
That's a Mike Grell creation, and the nearest thing I have to it are my biker novels.
You're right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I wasn't sure if that was the case. I'd always wanted to see you do it because I wanted to see your edge on that and what you brought to it, and I always thought that would be kind of neat to see. So the other thing that you're doing right now is the blog, and now that you're sort of working on writerly advice and talking about some of the things that make great writing, that's really in my wheelhouse, and I think what a lot of my listeners would like to know a little more about. What sort of got you started doing the blogging? Was that another Anne prodding you, or was that you kind of saying, maybe I'll do it myself?
Oh, no, it's Anne. She says... all right, I'm giving you a schedule. This is what we're going to do. On Monday, I need a graphic.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, I need a blurb for your book. On Wednesday, we're going to do a video. On Thursday, you're going to give a writing tip. And on Friday, you're going to update your blog. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay.
She sounds like a fantastic social media manager. I'll give her that.
She's great. That's what she does for a lot of people.
As you've done some of these blogs and exposed some of the things that you want people to know and what you've learned, Is there an aha moment for yourself here? Is there something that kind of comes up and you go, I need to make sure I say this? I mean, because I think a lot of writers...
I don't have an agenda. My only goal is to entertain, but I know how to do that really well.
Right. But because I was going to say, I mean, when you talk writing, and some of the stuff you've put out has been fantastic, but is there maybe one nugget or two that somebody... in fact, I'm interviewing a guy who's doing an independent comic. He's a writer as well. And I'm just curious, aside from, obviously, get protagonist up tree, throw rocks at him, make him hurt, then get him down from tree, what's the other sort of piece of advice you want to give writers as they're sort of wallowing in?
Oh, well, man, I got so much.
Well, what's the one that, I mean, that it's a go, no-go sort of situation. What's that one piece?
I would say I have 3 rules which I lay out for aspiring writers. And number 1 is it's your job to entertain.
Right.
Make sure you're entertaining. Number 2 is to show, don't tell. That's crucial to all literature, not just comic books, but novels as well.
Yeah.
And 3 is to be original.
I guess the one thing that a lot of my listeners will like to know is when you say show don't tell, what and this is something I've noticed too, is in your say for instance your relationship on your latest projects with the comic book artists, how much are you giving them in the script? Are you more Alan Mooring it, where you're giving them hundreds of words of exposition to make sure they get the can that's in the corner of the alley, or are you saying, an alley, New York street?
No, it's in between. My scripts are very detailed, but they give you only what you need to know. And I put in everything, and that includes all dialogue, all captions. And it goes like this. Page 1, panel 1, exterior, night, rural roadhouse with pickup trucks parked outside, horizontal.
Okay.
Voices from inside. And then I give the dialogue.
Okay.
And then page 1, panel 2, interior roadhouse. We're looking down at the bar, past the blades of a ceiling fan, at a bunch of bikers. 4 bikers are at the bar. They're being served by a buxom young lady.
Okay.
And the 4 bikers are Willie, Tom, Jack, and Doc. And Willie is in his 60s. He's fat. He's bearded. He looks like Santa Claus. And I'll go like that. And then I say, and Willie. And then his dialogue is, Doc, what'd you do with that? With the cigarettes or something, and
so not to the point of pedantics where it's like a 1954 pickup and one of the all right, because I know that you can go different ways with that, but you do, as a course of business though, you do tend to develop a shorthand.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if it's shorthand. I mean, I never stint on any script. I give the same detailed script to Bob that I do to Jack.
Okay.
Whether I know him or not. I just posted a bunch of pages on your Facebook page from Offworlder.
Okay.
And they're by Jordi Armengol. He's a Spanish artist I've never met, and he's killing it. Just killing it.
I will take a look at them as soon as I get done. I'm looking forward to sharing those with our folks too.
All right.
When you are writing your novels, I have found that I am a son of a bitch with the end. I'm pretty damn good with the beginning. I'm really good with dialogue, but something about that squishy center is where I have the hardest time plotting through. When you're talking to other writers, or even if it's you, do you find that that's the hardest part to kind of get through, is that middle part, or where is it for you?
Well, there's no part that's any harder than any other part.
Okay.
And one of the reasons is that I work up a detailed outline beforehand. Okay. And the outline is entertaining in and of itself. I want the outline, I want to be able to hand it to someone and they start reading and they say, holy shit, I got to see the finished product.
Got it, yeah.
My goal, as always, is to grab the reader by the throat and drag him into the narrative to the exclusion of all else. Mm-hmm. And then I get involved in the journey. Now, when I do come up to a point where I don't know what happens next, and that's the essential question in all fiction is, what happens next? When that happens, I don't know what happens next, which is not often, I back away from the computer, I retreat to my bed with a notepad and a pen, and I write down everything that could happen next, no matter how silly or ridiculous, and I'll drag in some extraneous stuff too. And the answer will come to me, and it will usually come to me right there while I'm sitting on my bed, and then I'll go back to the computer and write some more.
So you don't get what most would term as writer's block on certain things, or are you pretty free and clear of that?
No, because I think about it a lot ahead of time.
Okay.
And I say this to writers: if you don't know what happens next, back away from the keyboard, get out the notepad, and just start playing with it.
Just go do something else and then come back to it, right? I mean, just to kind of take your head away from it. Yeah, okay, that's kind of what I've always heard as the general advice. I was rereading one of the oldies I read last week. We do a section on the show just where I take 3 comics that I pull out of the dollar bin, and one of those was Nexus Legends. It was a first reprint of the Judah Maccabee story, which I enjoy immensely. And there's a part where Judah comes off the ship and he doesn't have his head, and you have that lightning bolt sort of crackling. Yeah. What was? How did that come about? I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like a natural choice with the other floating heads, but was that a fun script to write? I mean, did you? It was fun to read, that's for sure.
Well, it was grim, Jim. I mean, I thought Judah lost his head. How was he going to get it back? It wasn't the heads that did it to him. It was Clausius the slave.
Clausius, right? Yeah, no,
and I tried to make it as horrifying, but then he got his head back. But it was a horrifying moment.
It was. It was almost Darth Vader, Star Wars 4 entering. That scared the shit out of me when I was 7 years old. Seeing Darth Vader come out, it was that kind of moment for me. I'll never forget that. So you've got a lot of projects in the work. You're pretty busy right now, huh?
I'm busy. I'm never as busy as I want to be, but I'm very busy.
Are you doing cons at all?
I'm going to be at the Pikeville, Kentucky Con, August 2 and 3, and I'll be at Dragon Con over Labor Day.
I'll miss you then. Sorry to hear that. I think the one other thing I think as a writer is I think one of the questions that came up recently with a group of my friends is how do you differ from, say, and this may be the wrong term or a pejorative term, but how is someone who is like you, an industry professional, differed from, say, a person who puts out a independent comic book? I think people were asking the question, when do I know I finally made it into the comics industry? And I know that question differs from place to place, but when did you feel like you had sort of made it as a writer and those kinds of things? When did you feel like, okay, I'm in the crowd, I'm in the place? What was it for you?
Well, with the publication of Nexus by Capital Comics, and I was always unhappy with I was happy with the comic book writing for the most part, but it just took me a long time to learn how to write a novel. I'd struggled with that for many years, and I had a very difficult period in my life, which ended up me moving to Colorado. Mm-hmm. But then one day about 10 years ago, I picked it up again, and I realized that I understood the form, and I was no longer afraid of the novel, and now I'm just a novel writing machine.
Right. Yeah, you've definitely been prolific over the last few years. I guess finally what I'd ask is sort of you've got the couple of I guess you sort of answered them, but I'll kind of let you do a summary. What's kind of on the horizon for you, and kind of sum up, folks, what's coming next for Mike Barron?
Well, all my biker books are moving to Wolfpack Publishing. They'll have an announcement soon.
Okay.
I'm very excited about this because my previous publisher, God bless them, wonderful people, but they had no marketing plan, and they did nothing. And the books just sat there, whereas Wolfpack knows what to do with these books. They specialize in thrillers and adventures, and I'm very excited about there are 4 biker novels in print, and I've got 3 more finished. So there are already 7 biker novels.
Okay.
We're going to launch the Kickstarter for Offworlder in about 10 days, and I've posted the art on your page. It will knock you out.
I'll make sure I share that. Yep.
And I'll be happy to send you descriptions of what the stories are about as well. Like I said, I write an outline, and I also write a blurb. And it's one of the first things I teach would-be writers is I ask them, what is your story about? And when somebody asks you that question, you can't hem and haw.
No.
You got to come out and hit them between the eyes with a concise and enticing description.
Got to have your elevator pitch, right?
Right. And I'll give you an example. What's Florida Man about? Well, Gary Duba's having a bad day. There's a snake in his toilet, a rabid raccoon in the yard, and his girl Crystal's in jail for getting naked at a Waffle Hut and licking the manager. So Gary sets off with his best friend Floyd to sell his prize Barry Bonds rookie card to raise the $500 needed for bail. But things get out of hand.
I'm in. I'm totally in. I love it. Especially since you named her Crystal. I love that because I automatically heard, and now coming to stage 3 is Crystal. That's immediately what I heard, so I was totally in.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Mike, I really appreciate that you took a little time, and it's always great to catch up with you, and I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner, but I, too, have had some movements and some challenges, but it's always great to speak with you, and I'm always glad you take the time to talk, so thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right, Mike, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye. Mike, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Is there anything I could do for you? I mean,
well, you know, now
I want to promote your
Facebook
Kickstarter, but what else can I do for you?
That's it. You know,
Okay.
we'll be in touch over Facebook now that we're Facebook friends.
Yes.
I sent you some art. Take a look at that.
Okay.
You'll
Yeah,
like it.
I will. All
right.
And I'm really looking forward to finishing Banshees. Like I said, I just got kicked into it, and it's my kind of book. I'm just totally... I had this rock band in the comic that I wrote recently, and I wanted to do more with it, but they're only like a page and a half, and I thought, I need to do more with this. But I think Banshees might be like the fleshed out part of that idea, so I'm looking forward to finishing.
Jason, you know, the most effective sales tool there is word of mouth. If you like the book, mention it to your friends.
Absolutely, I will. Thanks, Mike. All right, that'll do it for this week's edition of Dollar Box Reads, which falls on the 42nd anniversary of Star Wars A New Hope. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please subscribe via iTunes, via Spreaker, via Spotify. Go to dollarboxreads.libsyn.com or find a podcast outlet and subscribe as quickly as you can. The video portion of the show can be found on YouTube on the Atomic Bazooka Studios website. You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/dollarboxreads. Easy to find. We really would like to know your feedback on the podcast. You can send that to me via Twitter, Jason Tudor, or through email at info@jasontudor.com. If you're listening out there, thank you. The numbers have been going up slowly. I appreciate that you're tuning in and giving this a listen. My thanks to Nexus and Badger writer, Eisner Award winner, and friend of the show, Mike Barron, for stopping by for an interview. We always appreciate when he gives us a few minutes of his time to talk writing and whatever else he is working on. Thanks, Mike. Finally, it's Memorial Day, so I hope you'll take a few moments of silence during your picnic, your event, or whatever it might be, to remember those who fell in battle, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and Coast Guardsmen, United States, allied, and partner nations around the world. They made the ultimate sacrifice and paid the ultimate price. Appreciate a moment of silence for my brothers and sisters in arms. Thanks very much. Please treat one another kindly, and I'll see you next week.